So good afternoon once again to everyone good afternoon for Sri Lankan participants and good morning for our participants from the United Kingdom and warm greetings for the rest who are joining from different time zones in the world. So welcome all of you to the technical session 5C on disaster risk reduction. I'm Chetika Benayaka from the Department of Town and Country Planning, University of Moratuwa, and my co-chair, Mrs. Gauthami Chandraratna, a practitioner from a leading non-profit business organization in Sri Lanka. So she is the Director Operations of Janata Action GT Limited. So without taking much time, let us quickly brief the session details. So the duration of the session is 1.5 hours with the lineup of 6 presentations, and I was informed that we will be having 5 presentations out of them. So all the presentations will be presented as pre-made 10 minutes videos, and these videos will be played by Anupa from the technical end of UK. And once the video presentation is over, there will be a Q&A session, which is my co-chair handles with you all. We have time to allocate for question and answers up to 5 minutes, but as we do not have one presenter here, we might take up some additional time at the end also. So if there are any remaining questions, so I will encourage all participants to type them in the chat box and invite all presenters to reply if possible. So the online audience members, you all are provided with an opportunity to ask questions via the chat box function in the Zoom meeting. So you may post your questions during the presentations or after the presentation. So now we are moving to the first presentation, that is on policy recommendations for establishing a long-term landslide risk management strategy in Sri Lanka. So abstract ID is 180. So on behalf of 6 co-authors from ADPC Thailand, NBRO Sri Lanka, University of Huddersfield UK, and University of Moratuwa, Sri Lanka. So Mr. Aramapola is making the presentation. So Anupa, can we have the presentation now?
First of all, on behalf of all my co-authors, I would like to thank the organizers for providing this opportunity to present our paper on policy recommendations for establishing a long-term landslide risk management strategy for Sri Lanka. My presentation outline is research problem, methodology, pilot area selected for field studies, primary and secondary data collection, findings of the study, the essentials for creating an enabling environment, conclusions. Research problem. As observed from records, currently, landslides have become one of the major disaster events in Sri Lanka. It has increased in frequency, magnitude, as well as environmental, economic, and social impact. The behavior of triggering factor, which is the higher precipitation events, show a significant increase in intensity, magnitude, and number of events in some years. But it is quite understandable. Since it is influenced by the global climate change, it is also unavoidable. What can be controlled is the other factors that are responsible for increasing the risk. They are mainly associated with increases in unfitting human interventions, land use changes, and also none or lack of efforts in compliance with existing policies and regulations. So attempt has been made to undertake a research study to understand the type of technical difficulties, implementation gaps, institutional weaknesses in order to propose necessary policy frameworks for effective landslide risk management. The study was possible because of the World Bank funded Community Landslide Risk Management Project implemented in Sri Lanka. One of the objectives of the project was to provide recommendations for establishing a comprehensive framework and long-term operational action plan for landslide risk management that provided a window of opportunity for the research study. Research methodology. First, we have carried out an extensive review of literature to understand the current policy environment related to landslide risk management in order to find risk domains, and also similar strategies adopted in more developed countries. We have studied the existing policies and practices as well as legal and institutional arrangements under several associated thematic areas: conservation of forest and protection of upper watershed areas, land use planning and land management, protection of environment and natural resources, soil conservation, prevention of soil erosion and land degradation, water resource management and conservation, and disaster risk management. Then we have carried out field studies to collect primary data to understand the types of landslide vulnerabilities, level of existing risk, and reasons for gradual risk enhancement. This was followed by a study based on secondary data collected through stakeholder consultation. It covered the relevance of current policies and practices to landslide risk management, challenges in administering them, current level of compliance, and reasons for poor compliance, effectiveness of the institutional setup. A national level validation workshop was organized at the final stage of the project with the participation of around 100 attendees comprised of representatives from government, semi-government institutions, academia, INGOs and NGOs, media. The pilot area selected for field studies. We have discovered during the study that out of all landslide-prone districts, Badula district has shown highest vulnerability to landslides. It has more information coverage in terms of hazard maps, special investigation reports, landslide studies, etc. So it was decided to carry out the study based on Badula district. Since study period was limited to 1 year, for most vulnerable divisional secretariat divisions, namely Badulla, Haputale, Haliyala, and Haldummala were selected as pilot type for the study. Let me go into the findings of the study quickly, which gives us the essentials for creating an enabling environment. During field visit, it was observed that there are several inappropriate practices, mainly associated with land use and land management associated with higher slopes. There are also implementation gaps that do not support efficient management of landslide-prone areas. It is obvious that if such practices are continued, the landslide risk will grow exponentially in future, and managing the risk will not be technically feasible or economically cost-effective. Study revealed that a number of policies of relevance are in existence as various enactment ordinances, regulatory framework. But since most of them came into effect before the enforcement of Sri Lanka Disaster Management Act number 13 of 2005, there is only a little mention about disaster risk management. There is an essential need to integrate the subject of landslide risk management into the scope and the subject areas described in various enactments in an appropriate way. We feel it is essential to introduce operational and administrative guidelines spelling out the responsibilities and the accountability of various executing agencies and authorities responsible for disciplines such as human settlement, land use planning, housing and building construction, roads and infrastructure development. The current legal status of the focal agency for landslide risk management, the National Building Research Organization, is a research organization. It is a significant weak point for functioning effectively as the focal point, although they possess necessary technical competency. The other notable point is that the current usually relies on conventional engineering solutions for landslide risk mitigation, but it provides limited answers to some problems, in particular at community and household level. It is necessary to explore the possibility of other possible options, such as nature-based solutions and hybrid solutions, which offer a set of viable, cost-effective, and environmentally friendly solutions. Currently, there are many challenges in addressing the issue of last-mile dissemination of landslide early warning. Creating more awareness of the people exposed to landslide hazard is important for effective response. Creating unified standard operation system for early warning dissemination is essential, forming effective networks between technical institutions, district authorities, and high-risk communities. We also feel that the current resettlement and relocation processes also should be reviewed to ensure active participation of beneficiaries in decision-making process to enhance quality, resultant outcome, to ensure their ownership. It is essential to introduce special programs for rehabilitation, productive use of land abandoned due to relocation of families, as well as for rehabilitation of underutilized and poorly managed land, in particular within the plantation sector. At the end, I wish to present following conclusions. Poor technical understanding, implementation gaps, institutional weaknesses observed to be the main reasons for lack of compliance with current policies and procedures. Hence, it is essential to introduce an effective system for administering them and also a mechanism for regular monitoring in future. The current legal status of the NBRO as the focal agency for landslide disaster risk management is desired to be upgraded so that NBRO will be able to function as a monitoring agency while discharging its current technical function. The policy reforms recommended should be considered as a progressive approach that will reduce the existing risks, do not allow creating future risks, and capable of meeting the consequences arising due to events that are unpredictable. It is essential to pay more attention to the aspect of reduction of future risk. If it can be managed well, it can be the cheapest way to reduce landslide risk. But obviously, it is the most difficult. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Arambepala, for a great presentation. And let me check whether we have any questions in the chat box. Now, there's a big thank you from Loy Rego for Mr. Arambepala for making a great presentation. And I think now I would like to ask a question, Mr. Arambepala. Now, you have highlighted several gaps in, especially in terms of policy recommendation. And you highlight the need for long-term sustainable landslide disaster risk management strategy. What do you think? Where are we in terms of the strategy development? Are we into that? And how we could proceed toward this strategy?
I think there is a present strategy for handling the current risk environment. Government is doing resettlements, and also they are taking action to mitigate, especially in the road sector, schools, in and around hospitals and things. What is not happening is not happening to the desired level is the reducing the risk or future risk actually. Future risk is associated with many things, especially with the land management and land use policies and things. Unless we have proper actions to manage the land use and also managing the areas properly, especially riduce the clearance of high slope areas with forest and things. I think risk is going to grow. So therefore, if we can comply with the current policies, actually the policies are enough, and also there is proper legal and administrative administrative policies and things. It's enough, I feel, but the compliance is very, very poor. So therefore, we have to have some actions to improve the compliance actually. For instance, now in the health sector during COVID, they have issued several gazette notifications fixing the accountability, for instance. That's one problem. And so in this case also, maybe there is essential need for fixing the accountabilities. So I don't want to have more detailed answer because of the time restrictions. So I can do it again at the end.
Excuse me, Ms. Gautami, you are muted.
Thank you, Mr. Arambepola, and you highlight the need for having a futuristic view and future risk, and also aligning with the compliances. But the current existing policy is sufficient. We can go for another one question. This is from Roy Rego again. How do we make more support and adoption of NBS in additional to technical solution?
Can you repeat in
How
addition
do
to
we make more support and adoption of NBS? What is this NBS?
nature-based solutions? Okay,
yeah, in addition to the technical solution.
Yeah. I think nature-based solutions are gaining more popularity now, since it is connected with the environmental management, resource management, as well as climate change risk reduction. So now there are many institutions other than NBRO who is interested in doing that. But I think we need to have more practical examples, especially at the community level, because for the community level, conventional engineering practices are very expensive to do actually. So therefore, nature-based solutions are the ideal thing. It can be coupled up with the income generation also. So therefore, you can make it popular among the communities if we can adopt a policy to have more nature-based solutions within the communities. We had a practice of, for instance, Canadian home garden system in the earlier days, which has provided backyard economic support to the communities. I think this is high time for us to take up this kind of solutions, so that communities will be able to adapt such policies and also such practices.
Thank you very much, Mr. Arambepola. Now, Dr. Chetika, over to you. Time is up. Yeah, it's time to move to the next presentation. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. We will then move for the second presentation. And of course, there are a couple of more questions. We will definitely get back to Mr. Arambepola at the end of the session. So the next presenter is Mr. W.K.N. Chandrasena from the National Building Research Organization, which is presenting fire and explosive risk reduction in uncontrolled dump sites. So the paper ID 146. Over to you, Anupal.
Good afternoon, all. I am W.K. Chandrasena, and I welcome you all to my presentation. Today I am going to present about a case study which was carried out by the National Building Research Organization in Sri Lanka. So it is about fire and explosive risk reduction in uncontrolled solid waste dump in Sri Lanka. So before going to detailed description, I will go to the presentation outline. Okay, this is my presentation outline. Basically, it includes introduction, landfill fires and explosions, landfill fire incident in Sri Lanka, landfill gas measurements, which was conducted in major solid waste dump site in Sri Lanka, and typical landfill gas management practices practiced in the world, and what was the local approach, and the acknowledgement. Now I would like to get a brief introduction to say why this area is so important. As you know, landfill gases are natural byproducts of the decomposition of organic materials. For an example, methane, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, hydrogen sulfide, such kind of gases can be considered as the major landfill gases. But the problem is some of them are highly flammable. Due to that, it will create a risk of fires in solid waste dumps. Most of the undeveloped countries and developing countries are practicing uncontrolled dumping of solid waste as their final solution for solid waste management. Usually, uncontrolled dumps are not practicing proper landfill gas management systems. Hence, they are at fire and explosive risk. So, establishment of a proper landfill gas management system is very important in the management of landfill fire and explosion related disasters. So, let's move to the next slide. Here it is included some details about the landfill fires and explosions. Landfill fire can be divided into surface fires and deep-seated fires. There are two types of surface fires. Those are spontaneous fires and deliberate fires. Usually, spontaneous fires are caused due to high methane gas content. Normally, this type of fires occurs between 1 to 4 feet in the depth and it will create a lot of smokes. Deliberate fires are man-made fires. We can see a lot of human activities are going on in the waste dumps and dumps are fired by people to gain some economic benefits. For an example, waste dumps are fired by people to recover steel wires from the tires. Other landfill fire type is deep-seated fires. These fires usually occur in deep below the landfill surface, and they have potential to create large voids in the waste dumps. Therefore, it will result in a sudden collapse into the ground. But deep-seated fires are very difficult to distinguish than the surface fires. Now I focus you into major waste dump fires in Sri Lanka. According to my detailed study, I have found there are a lot of waste dump fire incidents were recorded in Sri Lanka. Among the major 5 incidents were listed here. First one is Grand Pass solid waste dump. Grand Pass is a very old waste dump and now it is fully closed down. But certain number of waste dump fires were recorded within the past few years. Second one is Karodian solid waste dump. Karodian is the largest active waste dump in Sri Lanka. Third one is Kurunagal solid waste dump. Fourth one is Mithramula solid waste dump. It is a deadly disaster. And fifth one is Badula solid waste dump. This slide shows the landfill gas measurement which was carried out in the 3 major waste dumps. First one is Grand Pass waste dump. So at here we conducted landfill gas measurement at 1 meter below the surface. Here methane gas content was varied from 5 to 20%. Carbon monoxide content was 4 ppm and H2S concentration was 10 ppm. When we move to Karodian waste dump, it is an active waste dump and we measured gas content at 1 meter below the surface. Here methane gas content was varied from 8 to 15% and carbon monoxide gas content was 195 ppm and hydrogen sulfide gas content was 13 ppm. So when we move to Mithramula waste dump, it is also a closed waste dump and we measure landfill gas at 1 feet below the surface. So at here methane gas content was varied from 5 to 20% and carbon monoxide gas content was 19 ppm and hydrogen sulfide gas content was 27 ppm. Now I focus you into Mithramula waste dump collapse. It was a deadly disaster. The dump was collapsed in 2017. At the time of collapse, the height of the dump was 48 meters and the volume of the dump was 1.2 million cubic meters. The collapse resulted death of 32 and missing 11 residences. These figures show the Mithramula dump collapse and its results. Okay, after the Mithramula dump collapse, several fire incidents were recorded. The collapse was recorded in 14th April 2017. The first fire incident was recorded in 17th November 2017. The second fire incident was recorded in 1st January 2018. Likewise, there was a series of fire incidents were recorded. During that fire incidents, we have conducted several landfill gas measurements. According to that, we have identified the methane gas content at the waste dump were within the range of explosive limits. And we have identified some voids. These are the gas voids. The methane gas content is very, very high close to the voids. And we have finally identified the dump should be rehabilitated. Hence, our main objective was to rehabilitate the Mithramula waste dump with the proper landfill gas management system. After we decided to rehabilitate Mithramula waste dump with the landfill gas management system, we did few studies about available landfill gas management system. Finally, we found there were two types of landfill gas management system. It is passive gas collection and active gas collection. When we talk about passive gas collection, the only advantage is it is relatively inexpensive compared to active gas collection system. The major disadvantage is gases are directly vented to the atmosphere. This is the passive gas collection system. When we move on to active gas collection, the collected gases are not released to atmosphere. So this is the active gas collection, and it is very cost compared to passive gas collection. In addition to that, we studied about the landfill gas well installation process. Usually, landfill gas extraction wells are installed in the initial stage of the landfills. Here you can see these are the gas wells and this is the bottom of landfill. There are no waste. The gas wells are installed before filling the waste. But this approach was not suitable for us because our solid waste dump was already filled up. Therefore, we had to think more about it. While finding information, we observed there's a method that drill holes on the waste dump and install gas extraction wells inside the dump. As you can see, this is that method. But it requires large drilling machines. When we compare with the meter mold, it was not the possible solution. So we have to rethink about the solutions. Issues involved with the conventional practices. During the dump rehabilitation process, we had to face a lot of issues. Among them, few major issues are listed here. First one is location of the dump. Metramulla is a highly populated area. Due to that, there was no accessible facilities to heavy machineries. Second one is lack of experience, because this is the first dump rehabilitation project in Sri Lanka. Third one is frequent fires and hazardous gas releases. It will be a safety risk for the workers. Fourth one is financial restraints, because as a developing country, we haven't a big economy. But this kind of rehabilitation works involved with several billions. Other issue is lack of free spaces. There was no free space for waste handling. Likewise, series of issues were raised. But anyway, we were capable to find out the suitable solution for the all issues. So now we have come to the next point, and here onwards I will describe what was my approach for gas extraction well installation. And as I described in the previous slides, the typical gas well installation methods could not be directly applied here. And as the responsible authority in the management of this waste dump, Urban Development Authority needed to use this rehabilitated waste dump as an urban park. So they had their own landscape design. Then we had to integrate our plans with their requirements. So if I see you, so this is the reshaped dump and this is their requirement. So as the initial step, we allowed them to complete their works. After that, you can see this is the landfill gas installation method. At here, what we did, we excavated trench. Nearly the width of the trench is varied from 2 meter to 3 meter, and this is the typical gas well. We use a HDB pipe, and this is the barrel, and we filled 20 millimeter gravel, and the pipe and barrel both were perforated, so you can see. And the normal height of the gas well was 8 meter. It varied from 8 to 10 meter. So this is the approach what we practice in the methanol waste dump. And as I mentioned you in the previous slides, we are going to install 24 number of gas wells in the waste dumps. Then we can cover entire waste dump. So these red dots indicates the gas wells. the distance between two gas wells is 20 meters. So all the gas well will be connected by a pipe network and directed to a in situ gas burning system. So addition to that, we have planned to install automated gas monitoring system. Then we can monitor the gas content using our mobile phones. This is already NBRO developed air quality monitoring system. And this figure shows the cross-section view of the dump. So vertical pipes are gas wells, and these horizontal trenches will be used to collect leachate. And this is the approach we are practicing at the Mitra now. Okay, let's move to the gas well performance. As I mentioned in the last slide, we have already installed few gas wells inside the dump. Here you can see a gas well. This is a gas well we have already installed. And if you focus on the right side graph, and according to that graph, you can see some gas wells are performing very well. For an example, gas well 1, it is emitting 45% methane. That means we have limited landfill gas emission to gas wells areas. For an example, you can see the gas well 1 area, gas well 2 area, 3. The emission rate is high. Other areas, the emission rate is very, very low. That means it will release the internal pressure throughout the gas well. Then it will reduce the fire and explosive risk in the waste dump. Okay, here I'm going to do a small comparison of physical observation before installing gas wells and after installing gas well. When we move to before installing, the frequent fires were recorded and workers were got sick frequently. The surrounded people sick frequently. And the cracks were propagated on the waste dump, soil cap, and other problems were recorded. And plants were not growing on the dump. You can see some dried grasses. But after installing gas wells, no fire incidents were recorded yet, and the increment of greenery areas. There are a lot of grasses on the waste dump now, and less odor problems. That means we have achieved our main objective by reducing the fire and explosive risk at the site. Acknowledgement. So here I would like to thank all the officers for the opportunity given to carry out this project, especially Director General of UD and NBRO, Directors of Environmental Division and Geotechnical Division, and also units of Moratua and units of Peradani. Because without their support, we can't do such a work on the waste dump. And this is the end of my presentation. So thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chandasena, for presenting findings of a very interesting research. And I think now I don't see any questions at the chat box. I think this is an innovation, I think. Now, I would like to ask from you, what are your plans to take this research forward now? This is, I think now when we compare the before and after situation, it shows the greater performance of the system. What are your plans in terms of taking this forward, and whether we can replicate, and whether you can, what are your plans in introducing and using this in other dumping sites?
Yes, actually we have used the typical gas well which was practiced in the foreign countries, but we are finding some information about what are the cost-effective method for landfill gases. For an example, reusable barrels and PVC pipes instead of HDB pipes. These kind of things we have checking for new landfill gas well designs.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Chetika, you have any clarification, comments or question for Mr. Chandasena?
Yeah, thank you. So it was very informative presentation, and so it clearly elaborated how difficult it was to come up with one solution after comparing so many options in the front of the disaster. So I would like to get a clarification, because like it was very clear for us that this is the most economic solution out of all the other available options, right? Yeah. So but still, like we have frequently heard of in other countries that methane hazard gases, like disasters, unless we handle it properly, this could be leading towards another secondary, tertiary disasters, right? So I'm sure there must have been certain precautionary measures have been applied in the process. So would you be able to elaborate a bit on these measures? So how to handle it properly?
Yes, madam. So we have planned to introduce a landfill gas treatment solution. For example, the water content is very high at the moment. So we have to do a preliminary treatment for gases. So we have to introduce some basic treatment process for the gases. For an example, I have already mentioned the in situ gas treatment method. So we are in the process for that.
Okay, so thank you very much. We are looking forward to
Thank you,
have
madam.
it. Yes.
Okay, madam.
Yeah, congratulations for your research. And I think if you have further questions on your presentation, we can have it at the end. Dr. Chetika, over to you for the next presentation.
Thank you, Gautami. So we are moving to the third presentation of the session. Miss Kinkini Hemachandra from the University of Huddersfield. So her presentation is on why mobilizing women's leadership is critical to effective disaster risk reduction. Paper ID 171. So it's over to you.
Good afternoon. I am Kinkini Hemachandra from the Global Disaster Resilience Centre, University of Huddersfield from the UK. My topic is about why mobilizing women's leadership is critical to effective disaster risk reduction. Increasing man-made and natural hazards leading to disasters reinforce, perpetuate, and increase gender inequality. For example, 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami killed more than 33,000 people in Sri Lanka and two-thirds were women. Similar situation reported from Cyclone Nargis in Myanmar, killing more than 150,000 people and two-thirds again represented women. Their vulnerabilities are caused by existing socioeconomic conditions, cultural beliefs and traditional practices, and minimum representation and leadership in disaster risk reduction decision making. Hence, this study aims to deliver two objectives. One, to explore the reasons why women's leadership is critical to effective disaster risk reduction, and to identify the barriers for mobilizing women's leadership in disaster risk reduction. The study was conducted as a part of a long-term project and using a qualitative multi-method. Initially, a literature review was conducted, and this will be followed up by semi-structured expert interviews. The literature review was conducted to synthesize the literature relating to the field of study using refereed journals, official website, and official reports. And this will provide the basis for developing data collection instruments. In this study, the importance of mobilizing women's leadership in disaster risk reduction was highlighted in three different perspectives. At global policy level, along the timeline, 2005 remarked the Hugo framework of action, emphasizing integrate gender perspective into all disaster risk management policies, plans, and decision-making process. Along the timeline, in 2006, 61st General Assembly adopted a resolution to speed up promotion of gender mainstreaming and women's participation in DRR decision-making. 2012 remarked in Japan introduced the Resolution 56 at the 56th session Commission on the Status of Women to emphasize the need of mainstreaming gender perspective in DRR policies. In 2014, United Nations Commission on the Status of Women made a resolution to emphasize the necessity of gender-sensitive policymaking for all stages of disaster management. Two major policy agendas were introduced in 2015, Sendai Framework of Disaster Risk Reduction, which clearly stated women and their participation are critical to effectively managing disasters and risk and designing, resourcing, and implementing gender-sensitive DRR policies and plans and programs. And furthermore, it is needed to empower women. 2015, through the Sustainable Development Goals, it was emphasized with their fifth Sustainable Development Goal as achieving gender parity and women's leadership. 2016 Regional Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction highlighted gender equality and women's empowerment and leadership at the core of DRR. Again, 2016 Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women emphasized gender-related dimensions of disaster risk reduction in a changing climate. 2017 remarked Global Platform for DRR to facilitate gender integration as part of national and local DRR policies and plans. Based on the empirical evidences, mobilizing women's leadership in disaster risk reduction is important to avoid women's vulnerability to natural hazards and also to avoid gender inequalities in decision making, which influence, control, and govern women's and girls over their lives, their choices, and limiting their access to resources, and also to enable focusing on the distinct gender perspective or specific vulnerabilities, utilizing constructive role of women in DRR, and to build overall societal resilience, incorporate their capacity and knowledge in individual as well as community resilience, and also to minimize the true cost of disasters and make DRR investment more effective, protecting human rights, promoting gender equality and women's equal participation and leadership, and also to incorporate their experience in disaster mitigation and prevention, and also to represent them as role model in societal change. In addition to global policy frameworks and empirical evidences, there were a number of successful stories which highlighted the importance of mobilizing women's leadership in disaster risk reduction. One example is from Indian context, Jaipur Mahila Mandal project. This initiated showed remarkable results on converting marginalized women into community resilience leaders in cyclone-prone villages in India. They were managed to turn up poor women into all-round leaders to lead on social, economic, and public fronts. Another successful story was found from Fiji and Solomon Islands through leadership strategies. A pilot project was conducted by JICA in Fiji and Solomon Islands to strengthen the central government's DRR abilities as well as to help communities from suitable evacuation systems for flood-affected people. The program was implemented through the region's Women Affairs Office, and the selected women then became facilitators in the event of evacuation during floods. Another successful story was found from Nepal Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act. Through their constitution, Nepal government identified gender equality, proportional inclusion, participation, and social justice as a key directive principle. Another successful story was reported from Japan in the context of training based on lessons learned. JICA conducted disaster and gender diversity training session in many developing countries. That is, based on the lessons they learned from 2011 earthquake and tsunami happened. Another important successful story was found from Australia. They have started an initiative after the Black Saturday bushfire in Australia. The initiative have demonstrated how to utilize women's skills and leadership for risk reduction and resilience building. Another successful story was reported from Vietnam. In Vietnam, women's leading role emerged in DRR system and draft legislation has many genders dimensions. Gender equality is reflected in the revised draft disaster risk management legislation, and Vietnam's Women Union has been legally recognized as part of the disaster management system. With the latest evidence from the COVID-19 pandemic, successful women leadership has shown effective disaster risk reduction measurements. From Hong Kong, Norway, Germany, Taiwan are some of the evidences. However, still we are behind the target. There are many gaps remaining in the process of mainstreaming gender into DRR design, planning, resourcing, and implementation. The reasons for the minimum level of results were identified based on the literature review. There were 15 different challenges were identified as barriers that prevent mainstreaming women in DRR leadership and decision making. Education, socio-cultural beliefs, religious beliefs, household income, lack of role model, family structure and support, poor image, occupational segregation, networks, household workload, policies and regulation, organizational culture, political environment, patriarchal culture, self-interest are the barriers. The next steps. The study will continue conducting semi-structured interviews, data analysis, and expecting to writing a scientific paper and a position paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kinkani, and highlighting the importance of women leadership in effective disaster risk reduction. And you have correctly highlighted how women are vulnerable with tsunami in Sri Lanka and other disasters in Indonesia. And when we go through your presentation, you highlighted there are more than 10 key barriers. So it's a very complex situation, and still it is very important to bring the women in front of disaster risk reduction. So just from, I think now we didn't receive yet a question to the chat box, but I would like to request from you, where can we start this leadership building process? There are so many ways, but what is your, based on your findings, how can we start? What is the most effective way to start this leadership development and bringing the women as the leaders, so change agents in disaster risk reduction process?
Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity. I think the best thing, it should begin with the top level. Because if you do something at the top level, you can trickle down to the lower levels. That's why I think we have decided to collect our data collection through the semi-structured interviews at the women who are at the higher ranking level across many countries in Asia and the Pacific region. Because when you introduce these kind of mechanism at the top level, definitely the lower level doors will be open. So I think based on that, we are trying to introduce some kind of intervention mechanism. I mean, like what are the policy aspects, what are the social thinking, as well as what are the individual thing that we need to encourage these women who are taking part in the disaster management activities. So I think the best thing and the best stage would be targeting the top level. So when you train the top level people, including both men and women, I think we can give a good role model to the people, those who are at the lower level, because rather than going from the bottom, it's very difficult to make a good strong voice things rather than starting from the bottom. So better to focus on the top level. So I think that is our target.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think you highlighted a very good point. The education and awareness should be for both men and women. So otherwise,
Exactly.
so
Yeah.
it
We will
can't.
talk about ourselves, so it won't communicate.
Yeah.
So better to, if you want some help, if you want some kind of like cooperation and collaboration in between, so both should work together.
Thank you very much. I believe that once you have developed this further, you will share these final findings, and this will be helpful for incorporating the policy and framework in all the countries. And
Yeah.
Dr. Chetika, you have further comments or any inputs for Ms. Kinkini?
Yeah, so it's an interesting presentation. So, Ms. Kinkini, I was noted that you have presented several success stories across Asia and the Pacific. So, like when you were looking at the barriers, I was just wondered, could you see any differences among the women in South Asia and then Pacific, like across countries? Because like if we compare Jaipur versus the case in Japan, so the status of women are quite different. So, were there any differences among the barriers as well?
It's a very interesting and very good question. That was the initial thinking which started with my mind. But when you truly read and all that, then you realize that it is the same situation, especially in Japan. It's a kind of highly patriarchal system. So it's the same situation no matter wherever you work. So I think there are some small contextual differences like social like cultural things, but apart from that the situations are almost similar. So I think not only in Sri Lanka, not only India, not only Japan, but when you read the literature you can see like even in well developed countries they are facing the same situation.
So it's very interesting observation as well, because now I have been living in Japan for 4 years, so I have well noted what you have mentioned. But when we go through literature, we are seeing that the popular story. So I would like to see how you would document and then come up with more scientific findings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kinkini. Now we can move to the next presentation, Dr. Chetika.
Yes, Gautami, of course. So the next presenter is the presentation is on Early Warning Disaster Risk Reduction Compliance Index for Public-Private Partnerships, PPP, for port projects. So the abstract ID is 173. So this is a co-authored research of University of Central Lancashire, UK, and EAE Business School, Spain. So let's us hear from Dr. Felix Romero about the research.
Good morning. This is Felix Villalba Romero from the University of Central Lancashire in the UK, and also affiliated to EAB Business School in Spain. Today, I'm going to present our paper's Early Warning Disaster Risk Reduction Compliance Index for Public-Private Partnership or projects. This paper has been co-authored by Professor Shampika Liyanage, who also belong to the University of Central Lancashire. Now, the presentation is the following. As you can see, the contents will basically be some introductions with some port references and the importance of port, a PPP conceptualizations, and also how people should be involved in those projects. Also, reference for port resilience measures. Then we explain the methodology that we have followed in the process of developing resilient measures and screening them, and basically composed of the survey and also a screening process that we will explain later. The results are a research instrument that could be a framework for the analysis. And also we make a proposal for a poor resilience index. Finally, we extract some conclusions and also point out the way forward. Port infrastructure is a key element in the transport network that has become crucial for many countries as they are capital-intensive infrastructure and also is associated with the economic development of the nations. However, significant losses have been associated with large-scale natural hazards, and that's what we believe that ports need to be considering disaster risk reduction strategy worldwide. Though traditionally port infrastructure has been served and operated by the public sector, the public-private partnership model provides an efficient mechanism for the constructions and operations of large-scale complex model for the projects. And especially the key roles in its funding and financing. The predominant role of the public sector and its private partner usually is not enough to deal with all the needs of the emergency actions required after a natural disaster takes place. And that's why we need new actors that should be represented by individual local community entities and associations, as well as non-governmental organizations that could be considered or could be called as people. We need to include people in, especially in the post-disaster phase, for the recovery phase. That's where we can found the model to a PPP model that we include an additional P for people. That's where we come to the P4 model that have been already introduced by several authors. And that is an efficient way to mobilize people through the disaster management cycle. This paper reviews case studies in PPP port projects using QCA's methodology based on expert opinions, and the paper aims to identify DRR measures in ports as part of an index approach. The methodology that we have followed, starting from the analysis of pilot cases and the revision of the literature concerned to the main topic of the paper, we have developed a questionnaire, and this questionnaire has allowed us to have opinions of plenty of experts in disaster recovery and also in ports that finally has been analyzed with the expert, or have been screened by expert interviews in order to get the final research instrument. The ports that have been analyzed are the Port of Colombo in Sri Lanka, also other ports in Indonesia, such as Makassar, Newport, Bitun International, and also Malloy Port in Malaysia too. In other parts of the world, it's also have been analyzed the port of Iquique in Chile and several ports in the USA, as is shown in the screen. Now, regarding the survey, the initial surveys included 61 questions, most of them closed, but some of them opened. Participation included 8 multidisciplinary country teams, and in total, more than 50 DRR experts answered the questionnaire. There was a 2-round screening based on the same panel of experts, and finally, it was refined with for expert opinions. Results are we show the factors, the main factors in 1 to 7 points, and basically composed from plannings for hazard and threats, hazard assessments, insurance and risk management, continuity of operation planning for infrastructure and facilities, critical record administrations, community support, and emergency plans. Out of these different factors, some issues have been identified, especially for example, for planning for hazard, the availability of hazard of emergency preparedness plans, the integration of the emergency response in contingent plans, and just given the importance that we provide to the community support, the identification of risk to the communities from potential hazard during the regular assessment risk to critical infrastructure and services. Also, the availability of communication plans to increase the awareness of the community. Out of this framework, this is part actually of our proposal for a port resilience index that is composed also for the country resilience conditions and the port-specific port limitations. And we showed how this can be a combination of these three main areas, and that's what we can compose this port resilience index. Now, as a conclusion, it's been research on the World Resilience Index to evaluate the resilience compliance of PPP ports. Research activities carried out starting from gathering resilience knowledge in PPP ports, from pilot case studies and literature review, developing a questionnaire answered by national multidisciplinary teams under the covered projects, preliminary result refined with the opinions of independent practitioner expert in ports, and the result reveals main critical factor and key resilience measure applicable to Asian ports. The result offer a refined resilient framework for evaluating the resilient level of PPP ports. Now, the way forward should be that some further research is required to refine the index as a holistic public decision model. The obtained results, research instruments may be applicable to different port projects, case studies, and the result will stably contribute to calibrate the index parameter. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Romero, for presenting a very interesting research finding. And I think this is based on the timely requirement. I will direct to Dr. Chetika, because you might have comments, clarification, because your subject area also relate to the what Dr. Romero has been done.
Thanks. Yeah, so it was very informative presentation, and so I can see a comprehensive study across ports in the country has been made in order to assess the resilience. So Dr. Romero, may I get a clarification? So when we talk about the resilience of ports, so we do consider port itself as the operating infrastructure, as well as the roads and other logistics connected to it from the inward, as well as from the maritime connection. So when you define the port measures and factors as one variable in your equation, so how could you able to count these external factors? Was it addressed, internalized, or the scope is narrowed down to the port itself?
Well, the approach is a global approach, it's a holistic approach.
Yeah.
And therefore we include all the facilities, all kind of facilities, but also the approach will go further to include the people who actually is involved in any of the port activities and people who live in the communities. So I believe that's part of our proposal to include the people components is quite important in order to evaluate this type of resilience. This is, I mean, by doing it through the PPP model, we might transfer part of the, let's say, risk of the area and also the cost of the preparedness plans to the private sector. And that's what we believe the PPP model could be very applicable for some specific cases, even though more sport has traditionally been served as let's say, by the public sector.
Thank you. So in fact, we need that kind of holistic approaches in order to assess the overall resilience of infrastructure as well as other systems. So thank you very much. Do we have some more questions, Ms. Gautami?
No, Dr. Chetika, we can move to the other presentations since we have very limited time left to end this session.
Sure. So then
thank you very much, Dr. Ramayra.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes. So then we will be moving to the last presentation, Capacity Building in Asia for Resilience Education for Strengthening MHEW for Coastal Resilience. Again, we are moving to Ms. Kinkini Hemachandra from the University of Huddersfield.
Good afternoon. I am Kinkini Hemachandra, representing Global Disaster Resilience Centre, University of Huddersfield, UK. My topic is Capacity Building in Asia for Resilience Education for Strengthening Multi-Hazard Early Warning for Coastal Resilience. Giving a background, the hazard profile in Asia and the Pacific region is increasing. In order to control and minimize, there are several early warning systems has been placed. However, they are not operating to the expected level. Therefore, it is necessary to strengthen existing early warning systems into people-centered end-to-end multi-hazard early warning system as suggested by the Sendai Framework of Disaster Risk Reduction in its 7 global targets. Therefore, the challenge is to broaden the existing single hazard early warning system and to provide a comprehensive multi-hazard framework with the regional level cooperation by capacity development among higher education institutions through conducting scientific research, development of knowledge bases, and providing advocacy to inform policy and practice. This effort has been fulfilled by the Project Cabaret, which is Capacity Building in Asia for Resilience Education with the support of the European Commission, putting 15 partner institutions representing European countries as well as Asian countries. Accordingly, the project sets 5 specific objectives. First, to identify intra and interregional cooperation capacity needs across partner countries. Second, to create an innovation hub. Third, to develop a capacity building roadmap in order to address regional gaps and priorities. And fourth, to explore, promote, and initiate opportunities for fruitful university partnership with socioeconomic actors. And finally, to develop innovative multidisciplinary training courses tailored for rapid skill acquisition for professionals from the higher education institutions. Accordingly, as part of the capacity building activity, understanding national and regional capacity gaps were conducted. Accordingly, 3 activities completed: a development of a conceptual framework, and second, national and regional capacity survey analysis, which resulted in developing 5 national position papers and 1 regional survey report. Finally, capacity gaps among higher education institutions in Asia were identified under 6 broad categories, starting funding and resource limitation, knowledge capacity gaps, coordination issues, self-interest and awareness issues, political and political support, and finally, some communication issues were identified as the capacity gaps among higher education institutions in Asia. As part of the capacity building in higher education institution in Asia, the Regional Innovation Hub was established. It delivers its objectives through conducting scientific events, short-term scientific missions, training workshops, and lessons learned through experiences. Scientific activities were conducted as intensive discussion forums, allowing free thinking, encouraging to delve into problems on the agenda to uncover innovative solutions. These activities were conducted over multiple days. Accordingly, 15 higher education institution members participated and developed 6 sandpit activity groups. On the topics, evacuation planning, local government and risk mapping, public-private partnership initiatives for resilient harbors, disaster and climate change resilience for small island states, technical, legal, socio-cultural complexities for multi-hazard early warning, and enhancing disaster resilience education. Accordingly, 6 sandpit activity reports were generated and 14 capacity building activities were conducted with more than 230 participants, and 7 EU-Asia and Asia-Asia exchange program were conducted, and another mentoring for resilience program were conducted in the Philippines. As part of capacity building program, 4 international training workshops were conducted on multi-hazard early warning and disaster resilience in coastal communities with the participation of more than 400 participants. From Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Philippines, and Indonesia, the workshops were conducted. These workshops comprised with talks by resource persons, field visits to disaster-affected communities, and meetings with national and local disaster management-related actors, and a secondment activity was conducted in Lian Bataan municipality in the Philippines. As part of capacity development program, 8 short-term scientific missions were carried out and participating more than 100 academics. These short-term scientific missions were carried out in between Asia and Europe and within Asia. These scientific missions gave immense opportunities to share their structures, curriculums, teaching and research policies and practices, as well as provided to engage with socio-economic actors from other countries and also to develop and conduct joint research programs. As part of the capacity development program, 4 open educational resources as curriculum development was introduced on disaster preparedness, coastal hazard, science and technology for disaster risk education, community-based disaster risk management. The Maldives National University has introduced these courses to their newly introduced disaster management undergraduate program as being the first kind of in the country. As part of capacity building, 7 policy dialogues were conducted at national level, regional, and international level. For example, a national level policy dialogue was conducted with the Association of Disaster Risk Management Professionals in Sri Lanka. At the regional level, key stakeholders were met at the ICG-IOWTMS meeting held in Indonesia. At the international level, Cabaret partnered with the 7th, 8th, 9th International Conference on Building Resilience held in Thailand, Portugal, and Indonesia. In addition, key dissemination forums took place, commemoration of International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction, and represented at the IOC UNESCO Symposium held in France in 2018, being the representative for the Multi-Hazard Early Warning Conference held in Mexico in 2017. In summary, Cabaret produced a number of outcomes. Develop capacity building among 15 higher education institutions, supported a regional survey among 21 member countries of the Indian Ocean Tsunami Warning and Mitigation System, produced 5 national position papers and 1 regional paper, produced over 80 joint scientific papers, conducted 6 international meetings and 4 multidisciplinary workshops with more than 400 participants, 8 EU-Asia and Asia-Asia exchange programs, and developed 6 special interest groups and facilitated 14 capacity building activities, conducted 1 mentoring program, 1 secondment activity, and developed 4 open educational resources, and achieved 4 externally funded spin-off projects and 10 joint research proposals submitted, and finally conducted 8 policy dialogues to strengthen cooperation among HEIs and other stakeholders. Cabaret delivered its long-term impact. The project helped to increase innovation capacity among member countries as well as enhanced regional cooperation. This was evidenced with the winning of the 2020 Newton Prize by the partners representing UK and Indonesia. Thank you for listening to my presentation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kinkeni, again making a very interesting presentation. And it was really good to hear that this curriculum has been already incorporated into Maldives. So I would like to hear from our co-chair, Ms. Dr. Chetika. She's in the academic staff of a university. You can ask some clarification, and I think you can explain how we can incorporate these type of important things to our university system.
Thank you very much for the presentation. So I think we really need that kind of leading initiatives for the academia as well as for DRR forefront all over the world. So so congratulations for the wonderful project. And in the meantime, there was one more question which was directed to Mr. Arambepola. So if he is already there, so I would like to relate it with this because the question was from Mr. Tushar Pradhan. So he was asking about university industry collaboration in the DRR and what kind of initiatives have been taken with the NBRO and other Sri Lankan organizations. So Mr. Arambepola, would you like to comment on it?
Yes, actually, no, in Sri Lanka, we have a very good collaboration between research institutions and also universities. And you can see that in most of the papers, it is co-authored with some of the academia. So therefore, it is one of the evidence that you can have for their collaboration and also participation. On the other hand, we have also sometimes difficulty in keeping staff in the university, in the research institutions. So therefore, it is invariably we have to have the partnership with the universities to get some inputs actually. And also we are getting also laboratory facilities and things, especially from the universities. There are that kind of different sort of support functions. I have seen the question from Mr. Pradhan. He is asking about the link between the geological survey and NBRO. Actually, in NBRO itself, they have many geologists working, and also they have a direct, contributions getting from Geological Survey and Mines Bureau. But unfortunately, Geological Survey and Mines Bureau, their main function is to help the mineral industry. So landslide studies a specialized subject area. So therefore, whenever needed, we are getting support. But at the meantime, we also have in NBRO the specially trained geologists to handle landslide studies.
Thank you very much. So in fact, we need to have university industry as well as industry collaborations, and it was well discussed by Dr. Romero that we need to have private-public partnerships. So the DRR is a domain that where we need a lot of integrations. Right, so thank you very much, Ms. Kinkini, for your presentation.
Thank you.
So
I think, yeah, Dr. Chetika, now I think now we don't have further comments and we have only 3 more minutes left. I think I take this opportunity to thank everybody, all the presenters for making presentation. And I would like to hand over Dr. Chetika to close in the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So in fact, this was a very fruitful session where we had 5 presentations lined up. So first from Mr. Arambepola, which provided a very comprehensive policy recommendations on the integrated risk management. And then Mr. Chandrasena presented a technical solution for one of the key problems in developing countries. So how do we handle the uncontrolled dump sites through reducing fire and explosive risk? Okay. So through gas filling. And then we had another very impressive presentation from Dr. Felix Romero. So on holistic DRR compliance index. So we actually need this kind of overall indices which address the diverse aspects of DRR. So it was for PPP port projects. And then, last but not least, Ms. Kinkini made 2 very elaborative presentations on capacity building. One was on women, leadership of women, so as change agents in the resilience building process. And the second one was on how to incorporate higher education institutions in this process. So I think these diverse ideas will surely contribute for the Colombo 2020 DRR declaration, which will be starting in the another link after a couple of minutes. So thank you everyone for the presentation. We actually learned many things from you all. I'm sure the audience too. So thank you very much for Anupa from the technical end for giving an enormous support. Everything went very smoothly throughout the session, and I would thank to my co-chair, Ms. Gautami Chandraratna also. So with this, we are wind up this session, and please log into the final plenary, which will be on the other link. Thank you very much.